Hey guys! Recently, I've been getting back into the swing of things, playing some TF2 and having fun with it. Regrettably, I'm a furry, which means I have Twitter. As a result, I came across this clip of Zesty Jesus talking about something on stream.
So when it came to the jetpack, the Dragon's Fury, and believe it or not, the fucking Hot Hand, these items were made to try and make Pyro more competitively viable, to one, increase his range and burst damage, which is what all the other competitive meta classes have, to increase his mobility without creating an annoying spam weapon that competitive players hate and they ban it, and then a melee weapon that also increases his speed so he becomes more viable for play.
He claimed that the Scorch Shot and Detonator were banned in competitive, and that the Dragon's Fury, Thermal Thruster, and Hot Hand were specifically made for Pyro so they could be more competitively viable. He had no basis for his claims, and was working off of what I can only assume was his own intuition as a predominantly casual player. Putting aside the willful idiocy of his claims, it got me thinking. Most casual players don't exactly know about the specifics when it comes to competitive TF2. A lot of casual players have this idea that competitive players are sweaty and toxic shitlords who only care about themselves, think that casual players should play how they want them to, or they ban every weapon because it's fun and they hate fun. This might be an exaggeration, but generally, casual players don't exactly have the most pristine impression of competitive players. Though, you can't really blame them, since it's not their focus in the game. It's not really something they'd invest time into for the same reason. The main point here is the idea that competitive players ban weapons that don't fit their ideal TF2 experience, or they get weapons nerfed into oblivion to the point of unusability in casual. While the toxic behavior and elitism on how to play the game can apply to both sides, neither side can deny that competitive TF2 has a whitelist that bans certain weapons from being used. The primary divide between the two communities seem to be the knowledge of what's actually banned, as in, what weapons are banned and why. Since casuals don't play competitively, most of them don't know what weapons are banned in competitive specifically. Inevitably, this leads to two outcomes. The casual player makes their own assumptions on what's banned in competitive based off their prior knowledge of either the weapons and or competitive itself, or they say whatever word lights up in their brain first whenever thinking about competitive, which is usually with ill intent. That raises the question, what do casual players think of competitive whitelists? More specifically, what weapons do casual TF2 players think are banned in competitive play? That'll be what I'll cover today. It'll be interesting to see what casual players think is banned competitive based on their own personal experience with the game. I'd like to mention that Woolen has already made a video talking about weapon bans competitive and the reasons behind them. It's slightly outdated, but it's a good video to get some knowledge about competitive weapon bans nonetheless. Huge thanks to Vic for Vendetta for helping me out with this project. He's been a huge help in gathering information for me and has overall been a really good friend. I'll be leaving a link to his socials in the description below, along with the Woolen video and the current TF2 whitelists. Make sure you go check them out after this video. Disclaimer before we start, I play 6s in RGL, so that's where most of my commentary will be based on. Any other leagues or formats will be mentioned in specific.
Lock and load because you complained about it a lot. Dragon's Fury for insane burst damage, though, it would be pretty situational. Sydney Sleeper just for mini crits, you know. Soda Popper, of course, has insane burst damage, really quick reload. I could probably think of more. I could see Buff Banner and Direct Hit, you know, like the combo of the both of them being banned, but not the individual items. And then, you know, the Vaccinator, obviously, because it's the Vaccinator. One more I don't think I mentioned last time is the Quickie Bomb Launcher. I think it would be banned just because of like the really high burst. Faster projectile speed, that's the main thing. That's why I think Quickie Bomb Launcher would be banned. I would also argue that the Scorch Shot is banned. I know it's not, because you showed me a list, this like RGL list, but I would argue it would want to be banned because of like, you know, burn damage is just mega powerful. And having AoE burn damage is insane, because you could just like spam their med across the map, or just scouts, anyone with like low health, and just being able to have AoE burn damage is insane. It's just constant pressure. But like specifically spamming their combo would be really annoying because they would have to prioritize healing them.
Soda Popper. Fucks up Demoman Soldier too much.
The Vaccinator. This is the easiest and the first thing people will think of when it comes to ban weapons, because being able to turn off half of the classes immediately isn't terribly fun.
Direct hit. Fuck that thing!
Why do you think it's banned?
Yeah, as a direct shit user myself, I'm curious as to why you think it's banned. I also agree it's likely banned because it's almost an instant delete button, especially to enemy soldiers and NG nests.
For a good player, the direct hit is basically just a straight upgrade for every situation except for rocket jumping due to the increased self-damage. In most situations, Splash is just a crutch instead of a tool to make use of.
Totally agreed, and was about to say the same thing. Though, I should add, the splash damage being gone is a real downside because it makes it hard to finish off kills, though that could be offset with the shotguns.
The Natasha, because it's a stupid fucking weapon.
Yeah, honestly, I forgot the Natasha existed because it's so hated. If the strafing trick is still a thing, then I don't think it's as ban-worthy.
The strafing trick doesn't work with the Natasha because since you're being pelted by bullets, the slowdown resets constantly, meaning you'd have to spend WASD about as fast as the Natasha fires, not to mention it would still mess with people's rhythm regardless.
That's fair. Spider-Man and the Thing. The Thing does so much stun and... Spider-Man. My guesses? Scorch Shot because people find it annoying. Possibly the Phlogistonator, but I'm not 100% on that, since comp players are definitely going to have better aim with rockets and grenades than most pub players, thus making Air Blast much better for defending your team. Plus, Air Blast can push enemies off objective and push Ubered medics away from their heal targets, so it's a very big sacrifice to make. Wrangler, because of the shield. Vaccinator, because crit immunity and damage resistance are going to be even more impactful when there's only 6 players on each team. Short Circuit, because the ball invalidates the existence of Soldier, and any demo who isn't going full demo night. Potentially the Uber Saw, but I'm less inclined to say that one, because no random crits means no getting 25% Uber charge for deleting that spy that missed his sab. Huntsman, on account of experienced players knowing about and thus being able to exploit the janky projectile. I've heard in the past that all Pyroland items are banned in comp for some reason. Something about dumb, barely noticeable changes to the environment? Diamondback, since it gives Spy free 102 damage crits for getting stabs and sapping buildings, which means he can insta-kill at melee range and 2-shot most classes at any other range.
The Quick Fix. Extremely fast Uber build, mirroring blast jumps and super busted in 6s, and its Uber is good since you won't be focused fire very often.
The knockback immunity on the Uber charge is another part to think about. Pyro can't air blast you, Force of Nature can't launch you away, and rockets and grenades can't pop you into the air. Won't be focused? Looks over, playing medic in 6s against 2 dedicated flankers.
4 if you're brave enough. Fuck it, all 6. Being protected by 3 power classes and 2 flankers yourself. 6s revolves around protecting the medic and demo at all costs.
The Power Jack. Insane, I know, but giving Pyro both movement speed and possible HP from kills seems too good to allow this. My only counterpoint to this is the damage taken on the wearer, but still, I feel it is too strong.
By the way, sorry on such a bad day. You can touch my boobs if you want.
Stupid fucking bull fucking user's fucking ass weapon. This shit has no fucking reason to be in 6s. The same argument as for the direct shit.
That's me, by the way. I use that.
Flog. Uber plus Flog go burr.
But what will I do with my concept for war-painted flog now?
The Girardi. Win mid for free. That's all you need to know. This stupid fucking rapier from Rakarna public combat test. Its advanced combo does an unblockable 36 damage out of 100 with confirmed using tidal pull. The weapon almost has more range than the spear and its Vi handler, with double the speed and half the end lag. It also doesn't help that it has the best R move in the game, dealing 16 damage, also easily confirmable. I'm banning it in all future tournaments I host. Girardi and Mad Milk. One button to give your entire team a massive leg up in the fight, only with the weak drawback of a fast recharge time. The Sydney Sleeper. It makes one-shotting medics with body shots easier.
Or you could just headshot them in like 0.6 seconds and be done with it.
Even the best of snipers would have a hard time doing it, and not everyone can be good at sniper. Skill ceiling shouldn't be an end-all be-all factor for a class's viability, but it unfortunately is for sniper, especially in comp.
Everyone forget about the Cleaver Gang. Scout having a mini huntsman that passively charges just kinda fucking sucks as a light class.
I think sniper should be banned. I just don't like sniper. It's not because I suck at it.
As a sniper main, I think you should keep yourself safe.
Thanks, mommy. Starting with the Scout, the first weapon that was guessed was the Soda Popper. A few guessed that it was banned, but for different reasons. Some guessed that the burst damage could be really strong, while others mentioned how the jumps can give him an edge over soldiers and demos. The Soda Popper is banned. The burst damage is really good for closing out kills, assuming the Scout can aim well, and most Scouts competitive can aim pretty well. It's their job. The hype meter is the main issue though, giving Scout free movement with no extra skill required. It's really just a matter of Scout already being the most powerful class in 6s, so anything that makes him more powerful for no extra cost doesn't really have a chance of being allowed. Another weapon that was guessed was the Mad Milk. It can give teams a massive boon during team fights, with the downside only being a short recharge. A scout with milk can just chuck it at the team they're fighting and instantly force the other team to make a choice. Either they leave the team fight or stay in the fight with a health disadvantage. Most of the time whenever this happens, one person at minimum gets milked, which is enough reason for a team to completely abandon. If they choose to stay in, the milk target gets called out and focused since they're a walking medkit. This also means that a team with milk can push without uber most of the time. Since the opposing team turns into health batteries, the team running milk eventually wins the war of attrition because they outkill the milkless team. All of this on a rechargeable scout secondary that he can get every 20 seconds. Not to mention that a scout can just use it for himself to take fights. 185 overheal scouts are already a nightmare to deal with, so giving scout an option to self-heal on top of that is just not a good idea. There's a reason why milk is banned in every league and format. The last weapon for Scout was the Flying Guillotine. This was an interesting one for me, but the person who guessed it was completely right in their assumption. Thanks, Zid. They mentioned how giving Scout a mini Huntsman that passively recharges is really annoying, which is fair. The cleaver giving Scout a fast recharging, long-range spam option is just not fun to fight against. Imagine taking a fight and just randomly getting chunked for 50 damage across the map. Either your medic has to focus heals onto you, or you have to leave to find a health pack. Either way, it puts your team at a major disadvantage during fights. If you get cleavered as a medic, it's pretty much lights out for you. If you choose to endure the bleed timer because your team needs heals, you're pretty much guaranteed to die to chip damage. People love shooting medics in competitive, so you aren't really afforded much leeway when it comes to your safety. Reminder that all of this is on a 6-second recharge. The reason why the cleaver is banned but the Rap Assassin isn't is because the Rap Assassin takes 10 seconds to recharge. On top of that, the Rap Assassin has a lower base damage, which only increases if you hit a long range shot. The cleaver does 50 damage regardless of range, you can have it way more often. Giving Scout the ability to spam from long range is just frustrating to deal with. Scout's balanced around his health and range, so letting Scout mitigate any of these is just a bad idea. The biggest elephant in the room for Soldier was the direct hit, with the main argument being the damage potential. Given perfect aim, the DH just outdamages stock. The chance to one-shot scouts at close range is also a nice bonus. I can see where this one comes from, but a big portion of competitive is spam. One of the Soldier's main jobs is to spam choke point, which is much easier with the splash of the stock and original. The damage prevents people from just walking through the choke and taking space for free during stalemates. Another job for Soldiers is sacking, basically jumping at the other medic or demo to get a pick, force uber, or drop the medic outright. The splash radius penalty in the DH can be a genuine trade-off in scenarios like these. Without splash, Soldiers can't deny choke points as well since they're forced to hit direct rockets. As a result, teams will just disrespect the spam and walk through the choke, given he's the only one watching it. The lack of splash damage also makes sacking more difficult. Gaining enough speed and height so you don't instantly die to scout makes hitting directs way harder. This also considers the medic being aware of you sacking, meaning they'll be ready to juke your rockets. It's a lot easier when there isn't a risk of getting popped up by splash. The faster rocket speed also makes it harder to sink rockets. The only reliable way to drop a medic then is to hit 2 directs on him before you get eaten alive by a scout.
That was close. Oh my fucking god. Scouts at 50 on
He's rolled! He's so rolled!
It's a lot easier said than done, in all honesty. An argument can be made that the DH makes fighting scouts easier, but assuming equal skill levels, scouts typically have the movement to beat a soldier. Scouts have more freedom in juking DH rockets since there's no splash forcing them to use props. As for shotguns making up the difference, soldier isn't really needed as a combo class like he used to be. You're better off running gunboats for the extra mobility so you don't become a liability for your team to heal. There's a reason why the saying is that soldier's the weakest class in 6s. The first and main weapon that was mentioned for Pyro was the Flog. The reason given for this one was that the guaranteed crits on the Flog would just be able to completely wipe teams alongside an Uber. The issue with Pyro in competitive is their mobility. It's really hard for Pyro to close the distance against the generalists, so it's really hard to capitalize on the Flog crits. Most of the time, Pyro's run as a last resort defensive option. If your team wipes on the mid-fight and the enemy medic lives, Pyro's job is to airblast the other team in the doorway when they Uber into last. Ideally, you airblast the Ubered scout away while backpedaling to your spawn so the Uber fades before they can reach the demo who jumped in. The Flog not being able to airblast at all just means it's completely useless for stuffing Ubers. Even if you manage to get a full charge by spamming flares into a team sitting in lobby, most teams don't linger in lobby since it's a spam haven for explosive classes. The only time you'd have to build oomph is at even Ubers, but Uber ignores crits anyway. Anything that can airblast a lot is meta for Pyro, so any unlocks that hinder that are generally considered underpowered. The argument made against the Dragon's Fury is that the increased range and damage can make it legitimately threatening, being able to match Scout in terms of close range DPS. The issues with the Flog apply to the Dragon's Fury as well though. The slower airblast just makes it harder for Pyro to deny Ubers. In the scenarios that you would run Pyro, damage doesn't really matter since the people you're fighting are Ubered anyway. It's better to have more air blasts so the shiny people can't get close to your friends. The Scorch Shot not being banned might come as a shock to some of you. Free chip damage and a stun in a game mode that's entirely based around health and movement would seem pretty broken, but there's a couple reasons why it isn't banned. First of all, the stun doesn't really affect much because it requires Pyro to hit a direct. Even if they did, there wouldn't be much follow-up. If the Pyros run on last like usual, the fire damage is healed off, or the enemy team backs out of lobby altogether. If you or someone else tries to push out and capitalize on it, you'll just die from spam and you'll be down a player for your last hold. When it comes to chip damage, the damage on the afterburn isn't really powerful enough to warrant a ban. It's only good enough for stalling a sack wave, since doing damage removes crit heals. Even then, Soldier and Demo already do this, so there's not really any point. The detonator is better for chip damage since the explosion's bigger, faster, and doesn't rely on hitting a surface. If you can time detonator flares, there's no point in running the Scorch Out over it. The Power Jack was an interesting choice. The argument against the Power Jack is that giving Pyro more speed and HP on kill is pretty powerful. Had it been in a class like Heavy, I could see the argument against it. Letting Heavy get to mid faster just makes fights a slow burn and really uninteractive. Pyro, on the other hand, doesn't have the same damage and range as Heavy does. You still struggle with range and high ground, and you need to pull out your melee for the speed, which also gives you a damage vulnerability. Pyro is really only played in defensive scenarios where the enemy team's pushing into them. The extra movement speed in this case doesn't really matter a majority of the time. For Demo, the first weapon that made its way under the eye of scrutiny is the Lock and Load, with the reason being, and I quote, "because I complained about it a lot." Opinions aside, a legitimate argument made against the Lock and Load is the range increase, which makes it safer to spam pipes. With stock, or more often the Iron Bomber, a Demo has to put himself in harm's way in order to do effective spam. Too far and you won't achieve anything, too close and you'll get bombed or meat shot. The Lock and Load lets Demo spam from way further away, making it harder to punish him for it. The increased projectile speed and lack of pill tumble also makes it easier to aim, which is good for his self-defense. An argument can be made that losing out on an entire pipe could be a legitimate downside, but pipes are already powerful enough to win team fights, so making them easier and safer to land is pretty strong. The added damage to buildings also makes it easier to spam out sentries, which is always nice. Interestingly enough, RGL allows the Lock and Load while ETF2L and Oz Fortress have it banned. To my knowledge, ETF2L has a whitelist philosophy based on purity. The Lock and Load giving Demo advantages that he quote-unquote doesn't need is reason enough for a restriction. It could also be because of the advantages I've listed, with the same going for Oz Fortress. RGL, on the other hand, allows the Lock and Load. In their eyes, it's just another weapon for Demo, since the loss of rollers can be a legitimate downside. No rollers means no locking out doorways, zoning, and clearing sticks with your primary. Overall, it's a bit of a hot topic, but the TLDR is that NA has it whitelisted, while Europe and Australia have it banned. The Quickie Bomb Launcher is another weapon that you might be surprised by. The advantage of Quickies is a faster charge and arm time, giving Demos an easy way to sticky snipe and defend himself. Being able to destroy enemy stickies is also a nice bonus. While it's true that Quickies are really good at giving Demo more range and self-defense, the fact that you're down half your clip is a huge downside that can't be overlooked. Having 4 stickies to a clip means there's much more of a cooldown between spamming. More often than not, you'll be reloading when you should be doing damage. Demo's main role in competitive is dealing damage. It's common for Demos to completely ignore classes they can't deal with, since he needs to be shooting the people in front of him. If he doesn't, the other team can just walk forward and collapse on his team. The only time you see a Demo defending himself is against people who land in his face. The Quickie Bomb Launcher can do it, but it should be the job of your primary a majority of the time. If your Pocket Scout isn't a complete bot, then you're better off running stock for the increased clip size. Note that ETF2L has Quickies banned, with the reason being that deleting enemy stickies was really annoying to deal with. Also because it could snipe scouts, I guess. We live in a scout society. The Natasha might be an obvious one. A weapon that hinders movement in a movement-based shooter has really no chance of being fun. The reason given was because it's a stupid fucking weapon, but let me elaborate. In the context of 6s, Heavies is run as a secondary option on last holds. If there isn't enough time to set up a sentry, Heavies used to force an Uber early and force focus fire. Ideally, you knock back a Uber Demo that's jumping at you while hiding into spawn. If you have a sentry set up, you can play in spawn, swap the Heavy once your gun dies, and play Heavy in the post-Uber fight. His health and damage forces teams to either sink a ton of resources into killing him, or to leave last entirely. The Natasha, while dealing less damage and not affecting Ubered players, is extremely unfun to try and push into. If you get tagged by Natasha in the post-Uber, you're almost guaranteed to die, since being slowed means Heavy's team can collapse on you a lot easier. The damage resistance while revved and half HP also makes Focus Fire less of a viable option. The medic can just aero tank the Heavy and there's not much you can really do except die trying to kill him. Giving Heavy, the damage sponge class, even more ways to sponge damage is a pretty fine line to walk. It's the same reason why the Fist of Steel remained banned despite the overheal penalty. The short circuit might be an obvious one. Engineers really only played on last holds where he forces teams to spot his gun, spam it out, and then push with Uber. The Engi's job is to stall the pushing team in order for his team to build Uber, or to stall at the match and force a stalemate. If the other team is spamming his gun, the Engi has two options: stay in spawn and let his gun die, or to stay outside and repair his gun at the risk of being killed. The short circuit avoids this entirely. Most competitive players have loadout swap hotkeys that instantly reset your health and ammo in spawn. This means that the Engi can sit in spawn and spam the short circuit indefinitely, preventing spam and keeping his gun live for way longer. This makes pushing last way harder, which is really boring for both players and spectators. Anything that lets Engi keep his gun up while circumventing the risk of him dying is generally disallowed because it makes last pushes a real chore. The Wrangler's banned for a similar reason to the short circuit, to a greater extent. The Wrangler shield effectively tripling your sentry's health with the downside of no pistol is just incomparable. The pistol's pretty terrible in comparison to the Wrangler, so you really aren't losing out on much. The Wrangler just allows Engi's gun to tank spam for free with no detriment to the Engi running it. Again, anything that slows down the game is generally disallowed, with the Wrangler being one of the worst offenders. The quick fix was the first submission. The arguments put against it were that the Uber build is faster, jump mirroring is powerful in 6s, and that the Uber is good in 6s because you don't get focus fired very often. The build rate increase is definitely strong. In 6s, the strategy for teams is to run the crits trig if both medics at the same time. Since the crit spills faster than stock, the medic uses it on the demo to snipe the other medic before they can get Uber as a surprise play. The quick fix has a similar sort of effect, but in a more defensive sense. The quick fix Uber isn't nearly as strong as stock Uber. The halved overheal and lack of invincibility means that your heal target usually just blows up trying to shove into a choke. Either that, or they get focused by 4 people and die anyways. Focus fire is a huge part of competitive TF2, and not calling focuses is a real issue a lot of teams have. The problem comes from the fact that you get it so often. Even though it's not the greatest for pushing and breaking stalemates, it makes defending super easy. The increased healing means that your teammates can get reset more often, meaning there's less downtime between healing and finding health packs. Combine that with the faster build rate, and it results in stalemates that last for an eternity because no one's dying on the pushing or defending side. The blast jump mirroring is also a legitimate problem, since it allows a soldier to dump their medic out of danger whenever they want. The easiest stalemate breaker is to sack, so the jump mirroring letting medic become unkillable makes it even harder to break stalemates. The quick fix just makes defending really easy, and it slows down the game a ton. The Vaccinator has the issue of the quick fix, although slightly differently. Being run full time can be argued as weak because a slower overheal rate can be detrimental considering how good overheal is. That combined with focus fire can mitigate the strength of the Vaccinator when trying to push. The real issue comes from last holds. If your medic dies and your team is forced onto last, the other team's almost guaranteed to win the last push assuming they have Uber and don't suck. The Vac allows the medic to have a mini Uber to defend last, since bubbles are enough to tank most of the damage. The other team has to shift focus fire onto the bubbled player while getting shot from everyone else on your team. It's also hard to break last holds given even Ubers. Since every bubble's 25% and you can build multiple relatively quickly, things like sniper and soldier sacks are pretty much pointless since the medic can just shrug off the damage while having mini Ubers to spare. Spy can be argued as a counterpick, but most teams are aware of a spy if the team hasn't done anything for a few seconds. The Vac just makes medic way harder to kill. It makes last holds extremely easy and slows down the game, making everything really boring and uninteractive. The Uber Saw was definitely the most interesting weapon that you guys submitted. The reason for this one being that 25% Uber is incredibly strong and can turn the tides of a round. The problem with that is that medics should not be forced to melee anyone under any circumstance. If they're in melee range, they're basically dead. Unless they're literally at 75% or higher, they do not need to go for saws. Even then, you're better off just running and trying to save your Uber instead of trying to go for a saw and saving yourself. Given that you're the slowest class in 6s, unless you're a Surf God or the other team has boogers holding together their brain cells, you'll be collapsed on the second your Uber ends. If you end up living, now you're out of Uber and your teammates play disad. There's a reason why the meta shifted to the Solemn Vow, since it lets medics call focuses on injured players. The Uber Saw was meta because it was the only medic melee that wasn't completely balls, and the Solemn Vow was banned for a time. The Uber Cell is definitely not strong enough to be banned in 6s. In a conclusion!
Mental sickness!
Sniper's mostly played in two scenarios, last holds and breaking stalemates. Sniper forces teams to respect a sideline at the risk of getting killed, which can slow down games because no one wants to push. Playing Sniper on last holds means you'll be fully charged most of the time anyway, so it doesn't make a difference whether you body shot or headshot medics. Body shots are easier and more consistent to do, so the fact that the Sleeper lets you get them more often with zero downside is incredibly powerful. The Girardi and faster charge only add to this. Even if you don't instantly kill the person you shot, you still force them to back up and wait out the Girardi timer. If they don't, they just die on account of being a shiny target for teams to focus fire. The fact that the Sleeper lets Sniper achieve the same effect as stock with less skill just makes it really easy for teams to hold last. In stalemate scenarios, the same is true. The faster charge rate lets the Sniper drop medics with a body shot sooner. Even if you don't get the medic, Girardiing anyone forces them out of the fight, letting teams take space easier. All of this from a faster charging body shot, which isn't exactly the hardest thing to land. As it stands right now, the Girardi and faster charge of the Sydney Sleeper lets Sniper be way more powerful with less skill required, so there isn't really much of a chance of it being allowed. The Huntsman was an interesting one. The argument for this is that the Huntsman achieves the same effect as the direct hit. Since competitive players are experienced, they can also abuse the hitbox jank to their advantage. This is just untrue. The direct hit lets soldiers blast jump and has a way faster operating time. The fact that you shoot without needing to charge means you can spam way faster and apply more pressure without needing to charge a shot. The argument that experienced players are able to exploit the hitbox jank is also not true. No competitive player even runs the Huntsman, let alone relies on the jank to get kills. The jank is a side effect of TF2 having spaghetti code, so the competitive players quote-unquote exploit it about as much as casual players do. In the situations where Sniper's played, it's much easier to run a rifle because its hit scan and forces teams to respect a sightline. The Huntsman can let you corner peek, but the projectile is much more telegraphed and does less damage. The most you'll get out of a Huntsman is a lucky blind shot. Any of these things are done more effectively with a rifle, so the Huntsman isn't banned. The Girardi is basically the Mad Milk, but mini-crit edition. It lets Sniper have a passively recharging buff banner he can chuck whenever he has it. I already talked about how powerful Girardi is when talking about the Sydney Sleeper, so imagine having an AoE version of it he can throw at people. The SMG's pretty bad at comparison, so the Girardi's banned in pretty much every league and format. The Diamondback, everyone's favorite revolver to hate, and for good reason too. The reason given for this is because the Diamondback giving Spy away to 2-tap most classes at a distance is really strong, with the only prerequisite being a stab or a sap. Interestingly enough, the Diamondback was a recent ban, since for a long time it was seen as weaker than the Letron-J. The Spy's almost always played on stalemates, where he's used to drop a high value target like the Medic or Demo. The Letron-J's increased cloak lets Spy get into position to stab more easily. The Diamondback didn't matter as much since you're basically guaranteed to die the second you stab someone. The issue comes with the fact that the most common invis watch to run is the Cloak and Dagger, since it allows the Spy to wait for his team before going in for a stab. The Infinite Cloak lets the Spy inch his way into the enemy team regardless of cloak duration. With the Diamondback, once you stab someone, you can instantly hit someone else for 102 before dying. Even if you don't kill them, they'll be way more vulnerable to the rest of your team. Assuming you do live, now you can either farm more crits or just use them while your team's pushing to give your team a massive leg up in the team fight. Revolver crits are really strong, the fact that Spy gets them just for backstabs is really unfun to fight against. It's something that Spy doesn't really need in his current state, so it remains banned. And that's it for the submissions. Overall, the casual players assumed 11 out of the 20 weapons correctly, which is pretty good all things considered. The most interesting thing about this experiment was the thought process when viewing competitive weapon bans. Most of the submissions were based off the power levels in casual, with an idea of what competitive is in their heads. It was certainly something to chew on. I think it's interesting to bridge the gap between competitive and casual TF2. Who knows, maybe we'll see more people signing up to leagues and whatnot. I don't know, a man can dream. Huge thanks to everyone who participated, and a huge thank to these boys for dubbing some of the submissions. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a good time with your lives. Peace, peace.